Right, so Britain has finally recognised the State of Palestine, and you could almost hear the champagne corks popping in Whitehall as Keir Starmer's government congratulated itself on a historic act, even as Gazans continue to starve, because that hasn't changed. In fact, nothing meaningful has changed, save for a diplomatic stance. Scratch the varnish off this façade, and you find something closer to a bad joke than a moral breakthrough. Starmer claims to be correcting the sins of Balfour while continuing to bankroll the bombs, fuel the famine, and subcontract the spy flights that make Israel's genocide possible. Palestine gets a change of stationery, Israel keeps all the weapons, and somehow even that empty gesture is blown up in his face, because empty gestures are Keir Starmer's stock in trade. The Israelis still rage as though London just armed Hamas, though. The Tories and Reform UK howl betrayal because Starmer is somehow less pro-Israel than they are. The left call it hypocrisy, which the evidence of course bears out, and Starmer, he ends up standing in the middle, looking less like a statesman than a man who's managed to anger everyone on both sides of him while changing absolutely nothing. Just another day for him as PM then. Right, so yesterday Britain finally did what Palestinians have been demanding for decades, it is fair to say. What many people here in the UK have wanted for just as long. They formally recognised the State of Palestine. And this is great news. It's a good thing. But right now the move needs to be viewed with perspective as well. For Keir Starmer's government, this was supposed to be a big moral moment. The Foreign Office couched it in solemn tones, invoking history and responsibility. Supporters whispered that Britain was finally correcting the Balfour sin of 1917, making amends for the colonial gift that had paved the way for decades of Palestinian dispossession. Starmer tried to frame it as a statesman-like correction of history, a line drawn under past betrayal. But symbolism is not substance, and the hollowness of this move on his part was obvious from the very beginning. In fact, we knew it was going to be obvious from the very beginning because this was Starmer doing something for Palestine. Recognition changed nothing on the ground in Gaza or the West Bank. The bombs are still falling, the famine is still deepening, the arms licenses are still perfectly valid. The British surveillance flight still flew from Cyprus, subcontracted to American contractors now as they might well be, allegedly done as another face-saving exercise as the RAF are sick of the bad press. Britain's complicity in the genocide of Gaza rolls on unbroken. The only thing that's shifted has been the diplomatic label. So what we have actually seen is gesture that was meant to make Starmer look like a statesman, doing something that was inherently way overdue, has left him scorned by everyone nonetheless. Palestinians who argue this doesn't go far enough, along with Britain's left wing. Israelis and Britain's right who argue it goes too far and try to pretend the British public are all against this with dodgy polls from the likes of JL Partners. Only Starmer's can do something right for once and still manage to do it in a way where everyone still hates him. Recognition sounds historic. On paper, it absolutely is. It means Britain joins over 150 countries in acknowledging Palestine as a state. It means Palestinian officials are addressed as ministers of a recognised government now, even though there are two such governments, and Hamas are still the government in Gaza, as it happens, after all. And that's a hole Starmer's failed to square, launching attacks on them once more, as he has done, even as he recognised Palestine. It means Britain claims to support a two-state solution, not just in theory, but in diplomatic form. The idea long gone the way of the dodo, of course, but hey, we must remind ourselves this is still progress, extremely limited as it is still. In practice, recognition means nothing. It's not accompanied by sanctions on Israel. No arms embargo was imposed. No trade deals were suspended. British surveillance flights over Gaza, flown first by Shadow R1s and later subbed out to those US contractors, continue without pause. These flights, presented by the Ministry of Defence as humanitarian and solely in support of hostage rescue, have long raised suspicions. Their flight paths, their timings, their persistence suggest intelligence is being passed to Israel, whether Britain chooses to admit that or not. It's a story blown apart by independent media, chief amongst which has been Declassified UK. So this is the grotesque contradiction at the heart of Starmer's gesture, because a gesture is ultimately all this is. He sought to present recognition as a moral correction, even an act of atonement for Balfour, but he did so while continuing to feed the very war machine devastating Gaza. What good is recognising Palestine if at the same time you are still arming the state that is murdering the people of that state? What good is correcting the sin of 1917 if you're still committing the same sin in 2025? And that is why critics describe the recognition as hypocrisy. A real recognition would mean cutting arms sales to Israel as well, ending intelligence cooperation, backing sanctions at the UN, isolating Israel diplomatically. Instead, Britain's recognition was linguistics. It was semantics. It recognised Palestine as a state, but denied its survival. But Palestinians know better than anyone the value of recognition. They've lived for decades being told that their nationhood is imaginary, their statehood impossible, their peoplehood disputed. So yes, they welcomed Britain's announcement. The Palestinian Authority described it as long overdue. Hamas also welcomed it, though their tone was a touch sharper. They immediately demanded concrete follow-up, calling on the international community to isolate Israel, to impose sanctions, to take meaningful action. And of course, if it was any other state, this is what would happen, wouldn't it? On social media, Palestinians and their supporters thanked Britain, but also called it out. They pointed to the absurdity of Britain recognising Palestine on one hand, while still supplying weapons to Israel with the other. They highlighted the timing. Recognition arrived only after tens of thousands were dead, probably a lot more if estimates are accurate. And all after Gaza was starved, after Rafah was destroyed, as the destruction of Gaza City rolls on unabated. They asked why Britain had waited so long and why recognition was not paired with actual measures that would actually do something meaningful. Because the truth is that Palestinians are grateful for any affirmation of their statehood because they are so used to decades of being denied that. But they are not naive either. They know symbolism alone is not going to feed the hungry kids walking past a market where commercial food is available but is far too expensive to buy. They know a declaration in London will not rebuild the shattered ruins of Gaza City. They know that without sanctions, without embargoes, without accountability, Israel will ignore recognition, just as it ignores UN resolutions. Recognition matters, but it doesn't protect in and of itself. The Palestinians greeted the announcement with cautious thanks, though. Israelis greeted it with absolute fury, because of course they did. Benjamin Netanyahu denounced it as an absurd prize for terrorism. He declared that a Palestinian state would never exist west of the Jordan River. Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon echoed the line, saying recognition was a reward for Hamas and demanding that Israel annex the West Bank. Ben-Gvir went further, calling for immediate annexation of the West Bank and the entire dismantling of the Palestinian Authority, and Smotrich demanded exactly the same. Why such hysteria over a gesture so hollow, though? Because recognition cuts at the heart of Israel's ideological position, and it gave them the chance to play the victim card once more, even as several just doubled down on their genocidal rhetoric. Since 1948, Israel has sought to deny Palestinian statehood altogether, to insist that Palestine is a fiction, that Palestinians are merely a security problem. Many of us have Bibles and the like older than Israel is, and featuring Palestine, the very much state of, prominently in the front pages. Recognition threatens that narrative. Every time another country recognises Palestine, Israel loses ground in the ideological war it has waged for decades. This is why recognition, even empty recognition, enrages Israeli leaders. They can brush off condemnations of war crimes. They can dismiss UN resolutions as biased. But recognition of Palestine delegitimizes the very idea that Israel alone decides who lives and who dies, who is a people and who is not. That's why Netanyahu's language is so extreme, why ministers competed to sound the most outraged. Their fragility was exposed by a gesture that in practical terms actually changed nothing. The fury was not limited to Israel either. In Britain, Starmer's right-wing critics, there are some still to the right of him of course, immediately pounced. Conservative MPs accused him of rewarding Hamas. Reform UK went even further than that, claiming he had betrayed Britain's closest ally and endangered national security. And yet they're still leading in the polls, despite being the most vociferous Israeli sycophants there possibly are in politics today. There were whispers from within the Tory party about reversing recognition if they returned to power. This is perhaps the bitterest irony of all, that Starmer, who has spent leadership demonstrating loyalty to Israel like no other PM before him, defending arms exports, refusing to condemn famine as famine, authorising surveillance flights, was accused of betraying for making a symbolic gesture. His loyalty bought him nothing. The right wing treated him as if he had abandoned Israel entirely. It reveals just how deep loyalty to Israel runs across Britain's political right wing. Support for Israel is not just foreign policy, it's identity. It's tied up with Atlanticism, with post-Brexit positioning, with the myth of defending the West. Recognition of Palestine, no matter how symbolic, is treated by them as heresy. And so the political spectrum looks pretty bleak. Labour recognises Palestine but continues to arm Israel. The Conservatives would undo even that symbolism but very much continue to arm Israel. Reform UK would likely go even further, competing to prove they are Israel's staunchest ally of all. And against that spectrum, Palestinians gain little from Britain's gesture. On the other side of politics, the reaction was the opposite, though. Palestinian solidarity groups and independent media dismissed the recognition by Starmer as hypocrisy. They argued that it was designed not to protect Palestinians, but just to save Britain's face, save Starmer's face, framing it as Western leaders scrambling to salvage legitimacy after months of complicity in genocide. They pointed to the attempt to correct Balfour's sin without addressing Britain's present role. Muslim media outlets in Britain accused Starmer directly of hypocrisy, demanding that he recognise Britain's part in genocide before he start congratulating himself for recognising Palestine. All of this criticism landed with particular force because the genocide in Gaza is very much continuing in real time. The death toll rises, children die of starvation, families are wiped out in bombing raids, Gaza is rendered uninhabitable. More and more of this we're seeing in the West Bank as well, and Britain still supplies the arms, still authorises the surveillance, still shelters Israel in international forums. Against that background, recognition of Palestine is more insult than solace. So the left's critique of Starmer is sharp. Starmer recognised Palestine, but not Britain's role in the genocide, which now has to come as well. But that is something I guarantee will not happen, because that would require Starmer to acknowledge fault. And nothing is ever his fault. He doesn't apologise for anything. And that is why the recognition has still backfired on him, and deserves to. Starmer's caught between every force and satisfies none of them. The right accuses him of betraying Israel. The left accuses him of complicity in genocide. Palestinians thank him politely, but justifiably demand more than that. Israelis rage at him as though he had launched sanctions. He sought a moment of statesmanship, but ended up exposing just how hollow he is, and frankly how desperate right now he is for a positive headline. Recognition without substance is worse than nothing. It's a smokescreen that fools no one, and it's not fooling anyone. It's a gesture that angers allies, insults victims, and pleases nobody. It turns a Prime Minister into an object of scorn rather than respect. Starmer hoped to elevate himself here. Instead, he has confirmed his reputation as an empty suit, a man who manages appearances while ignoring realities, who changes words while leaving bombs untouched. Above all, the hollowness lies in what Starmer refused to recognise. He recognised Palestine, but not Britain's complicity. He recognised Palestinian statehood, but not the bombs stamped with British parts, the famine prolonged by British silence, the surveillance flights flown by British pilots or now subbed out to US ones. Recognition without accountability is denial by another name. So this episode deserves to be remembered not as a breakthrough, but as a backfire. It's exposed Britain's hypocrisy again, Israel's fragility as well, and Starmer's emptiness. It's shown that symbolism without substance cannot survive contact with reality. Starmer wanted to correct history. What he did instead was repeat it. He wanted to act like a statesman. What he revealed instead was a man despised by all sides, condemned as weak by the right, complicit by the left, and hollow by the public as a whole. A Prime Minister who recognised Palestine without recognising his own role in its destruction. An empty suit presiding over genocide, congratulating himself for gestures whilst Gaza still burns. The end of his tenure in charge cannot come fast enough. And for Labour, they really do need to recognise now that he's never going to turn things around for them. Meanwhile, his other headache is who to replace Peter Mandelson with as US ambassador right now, and his options are now so limited as support for him within Labour itself bleeds away, that he's considering his recently appointed Deputy PM David Lammy for the post, apparently, which would trigger a tricky by-election, of course, should it come to pass, and actually, he has a more than fair chance of losing that to the Greens right now, surging as they are, whilst he declines. To get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here is your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.